Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we will be talking about a pattern change that I've been talking about in my past two videos. But more specifically today, I'll be talking about why this upcoming pattern change could be leading into a potentially snowier and colder October, and why kind of it may set a kind of chain of events that could lead to that. Now, the pattern change itself that will potentially bring this pattern, or this longer prolonged pattern, is most likely going to occur. Probably a 75 to 85, even 90% chance of occurring. It's going to be occurring into next week, and I'll briefly show you what that looks like. But then the prolonged pattern change that could be leading, indicating a cooler and snowier October, that itself is probably around a 50-50. So I'm talking to you about this just to show you the possibility of this occurring, and kind of just the fact that it may occur, because it has happened before where we have one singular kind of big event that kind of changes the overall pattern change, and it could kind of lead into a prolonged period of similar events. So I want to show you why that may happen, but again, the probability of this happening isn't too high. So if you love the snow and cold, don't get too excited about that. It's still a pretty kind of speculative thing. And if you like the warmth and you don't want a cold and snowy October, don't get too upset yet, because the chances of this occurring are again around 50-50. And I'll be making update videos about this, telling you, what the what the models are showing and what the updates to any information I have may bring to the conclusion of this. So let's start off by showing you the European model and showing you this initial pattern change that might precipitate this longer period of cooler weather. So notice that right now we don't have anything extreme going on. We do have the remnants of Hurricane Ian. It's not even a hurricane at this point. It's a low pressure. It had two landfalls, right? It dropped quite a bit of precipitation into the Carolinas, into Florida, devastation. So of course that was again very unfortunate, but do note that it is going to be still spinning quite a bit of showers and storms into the northeast, producing quite a bit of waves potentially. So that is definitely something to keep an eye out for, and just be watchful for. Elsewhere, though, across the United States, pretty high and dry. Actually, probably a very nice, beautiful pattern for most of the United States. There will be quite a bit of showery activity, though, kind of the central western United States, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, and Montana, Idaho. This will lead to some showers and storms, and this is actually, may not seem relevant, but this is going to be important to producing this initial pattern change that we're looking for. Notice we see a pretty strong cold front move into the picture around probably late Wednesday for really northern Manitoba, Saskatchewan. So, late Tuesday into early Wednesday, but by late Wednesday, this thing's already approaching the U.S.-Canadian border. So, quick moving, quite a bit of showers. And notice that this low pressure that's producing these showers and storms across the west starts mingling with this cold front. It starts strengthening both the cold front and itself, and it produces kind of this cold front to go much further south and at a quicker pace than it normally would have. And notice that it does so at a pretty incredible pace, and it does show a bit of snow. So, cities like Thunder Bay may be getting some snow. Elsewhere, maybe some grapple, some snow, and of course rain further south. But notice the main thing that I want to point out with this is this cool air that's behind it. Pretty cold blast of air. It's going to be, a pretty strong driving force that's going to be penetrating this pretty far south into the United States. I mean, even the deep south will be getting into some of these cooler temperatures. Notice this thing does produce some spotty snow. The GFS model, I'll show you that in just a minute, shows a lot more snow for these areas, so we'll have to wait and see which model is more accurate with that. Right now I'm leaning towards more of what the European is showing. Do note that we do see some spotty lake effect showers. Again, cold winds off this very warm waters. It's still relatively early in the season. The waters are still warm from the summer. That's going to cause some lake effect rain, and in some spots some lake effect snow, some grapple, kind of melted snowflakes type stuff. You're closer to sleet. So that is definitely going to be, it's going to feel chilly. It's going to feel wintry, and you can see that the European does end up evolving this into a nasty snowstorm, but that's pretty far north of the viewing area, and not many people are going to be impacted by this that probably watch my channel, but I still want to mention that. So the cool air brought by this is going to be pretty impressive. Let me show you the same model, but just on a different website to show you the anomalies. I don't on that website have access to the temperature anomalies themselves. And let's see. So again, warm pattern. You can see the remnants of Ian here onto Wednesday, Thursday, and that's when that cold front starts coming through, interacting with that system, and you can see quite a bit of chilly air moving in. Again, pretty expansive, and in some areas even pretty pretty anomalous. You can see 15 to 20 degrees below average. That will prompt, freezes and frost for many areas. And you can see this penetrates, again, as I mentioned, pretty far south into the United States. And the east coast of the United States will be also getting in on that action of chilly weather. And the European, by the way, compared to the GFS, whips out this cooler air a lot quicker than GFS. The GFS kind of lingers it around here for quite a long time. I'll show you that in just a second. Do note the European warms things up after that. The GFS itself, let me show you that pattern for you. So first, let's just show you the temperature anomalies. Again, this indicates, I should have probably mentioned this earlier, but where the temperatures are above or below average at any given time. The blue is below, orange is above, and you can see it shows that cool down again, pretty in line with what the European shows, which is why I have that, extreme confidence, 80 to 90% of this actually occurring, this initial pattern change. Again, cool weather, pretty far south into the United States. We'll be producing frost freezes for at least the northern Great Lakes and into the northeast. And you can see the GFS, this is what I mean. It kind of lingers as cool air around southeastern Canada and the northeastern United States, and more of New England rather than just the northeast for a bit longer. But eventually it does warm things up back up. So let's take a look at some of these temperature readings. European model, 2-meter temperature, so what the actual Fahrenheit thermometer shows. Again, pretty warm following up until this cool down. You can see even some 80s, 70s, pretty far north into Iowa, Nebraska, Illinois. And we do start seeing that cool down right there. Notice 40s, 30s moving in. During the daytime, you could see Minnesota, the Dakotas on Thursday will be pretty chilly, 40s. Some maybe not even making it out of the 40s. And during the night, some pretty chilly temperatures, some frost. So that's definitely something to note. And then notice that into Friday night, we do have many areas getting into, the frost territory and even just downright freeze territory. This includes, Nebraska, even portions of Kansas. So that's definitely something to note. And as I push this into the next day, now Saturday into Sunday, you can see another day of chilly temperatures during the night. And this especially includes potentially Pennsylvania, New York, and Kentucky, maybe even the Appalachian Mountains right there, West Virginia. So that is that. You can see that for a few more days, the Northeast stays chilly, but things warm up pretty quickly, according to the European. Now, that's initial pattern change, right? Pretty drastic compared to what we've been seeing, more of a stagnant pattern, kind of warmer air mass. We have seen a few cool downs, just not as far reaching as this one. You can see that many areas across the south get into those cool temperatures as well, especially during the nighttime hours. Let's go back to the European, and well, let's just go back to its precipitation type and rate map, and let's push this past this initial cool down and past this warm up that follows this cool down, and let's look at what it shows following that. So again, this is still definitely not too far out to start talking about, and look what it starts showing. It starts showing a pretty nasty kind of spearhead of cool air moving into the United States, a very strong high pressure pumping a lot of moisture into the United States, producing a pretty large system when those two air masses interact, and a lot of cool air behind this thing. So this is what I mean, right? We had that initial cool down, we had a little bit of warm up, but then right after that we had another big storm, or a big storm in this case, that produces another cool down. And, following this, what we may see is another warm-up and maybe another cool down. And, eventually, if you get into mid to late October with this pattern, with these big storms, you can see a lot more snow as compared to now when the temperatures are still on average warmer. Now, the European does show this. The GFS does, but doesn't really. It's been a lot less consistent with this. So let's go back to yesterday at midnight, the GFS model. And mind you, the European has been showing this cool down. Let me just start actually with the European, because I already showed you the European, right? This is what it looks like now. It's been showing this cool down since yesterday at noon, this secondary cool down. So again, the initial pattern change, that's pretty confident. Both, I'm pretty confident in that. Both models are showing that. That's pretty likely to occur. The GFS and European and Canadian all are showing that. But this one is where things start getting, a bit iffy. So again, the European, even as early as yesterday at noon, it was showing this cool down in its earlier stages. You could see as now we're getting closer and closer to it. So that is a European, and let me show you the GFS. GFS yesterday at 18Z, so let's actually just go back to How about noon, right? Because that's what we looked at for the European. So again, at this point, European was showing that secondary cooldown. GFS, it showed that first one, showed that system. And by the way, I do want to mention that the GFS does show a lot more snow with this first system and this cooldown. So that's something to keep in mind. That could be definitely something that occurs. Notice the GFS also has been a bit less consistent with the cooldown itself. Some models of it, runs of this GFS have been showing kind of a secondary cooldown following that first one. So European, I think, has just better handle on the cooldown itself and the following pattern as well. Notice it also develops a high pressure, the GFS, but it doesn't really bring any mentions of a prolonged cooldown afterwards or a big storm. It just kind of keeps things different, right? So fair enough. At that time yesterday, it still wasn't obvious. Let's now jump to yesterday midnight. So again, it showed that initial cooldown, right? There it is. But as you saw, because I'm going backwards now, following that cooldown, there wasn't really anything with this pattern that was incredible, right? I mean, or anything that indicated, a pattern change that lasted longer than the initial cooldown. We went right back into the pattern kind of we've been seeing. So that is the GFS, and mind you, at this point, the European was already showing the cooldown, the secondary one. Let's go back to today at noon. Today at noon, things changed up a little bit, and including the morning one, they were very similar. These two model runs of the GFS today showed, the initial cooldown showed a nasty little storm. GFS has been very consistent about that system, so that's interesting. But following this, look, they started showing that cooldown, what the European was showing, right? So it jumped kind of on a bandwagon just a little bit later. It didn't show the same exact format. It was a different storm. It was more of a cold front, but still showed a more volatile pattern potentially continuing. But now, with the most latest GFS model run, the one that literally came out 5 minutes before I started recording this video, it shows that initial cooldown, right? Again, a pretty high confidence in that. Shows a pretty snow-laden system for a good portion of southern Canada. But it doesn't show that cooldown. So it went from not showing it to not showing it. It's been jumping around quite a bit. And the European really hasn't been doing that. So I'll take more, I guess, more of the European side with this, as it's been more consistent than the GFS, though again, as I mentioned, this is far out, so me taking the European side doesn't really say much. It just means that the GFS would probably give us a 20 to 30% chance of a prolonged snowier and cooler pattern occurring into October, while the European, shows probably like a 60, and kind of averaging of the two with more bias towards the European, I would say around a 50% chance of this prolonged colder and snowier pattern with these, maybe not even snowier, because for some areas this will include volatile warm-ups, but for the sake of the video, I'll call it cooler and snowier as more people get excited by that. Cooler, followed by snowier, followed by warmer. This more extreme kind of winter-like almost pattern. The European, I would say, is more accurate, and I would give it a 50% chance of occurring. I'm just showing you that this has happened before. Well, I didn't show you that, but I'm telling you it has happened before, where we've seen one cooldown followed by kind of a pattern that follows that for at least a prolonged, another, period of time. That's usually a few weeks. So that could definitely be something we're watching towards, and you could see the European with its recent model runs have been confirming that. And I had that in the back of my mind the past few days I've been recording these videos, that this could be the indication of something new here. And really, today I was looking at the models and I was like, wow, I mean, the European has really been kind of showing that, right? We see a very strong high pressure, warming things up, but then right after that, not long, we see another cooldown, another strong system, potentially more snowy this time and more impactful. So we'll have to wait and see, guys. This is definitely something that is a changeable situation. I'll keep you guys updated. For now, that is basically it. That is all I wanted to cover. Again, tomorrow I'll be showing you similar, details and whatnot, and I'll be covering that a cooldown as well with more shorter range models as their data is coming in. Yeah, I'll be going in depth, which cities are most likely to see frost, freezes, and what's not. For now, that is basically it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next episode. See ya.